Well, China is a manufacturing hub for global consumer products, but surprisingly, less than 20% of consumers worldwide can actually name a single Chinese brand. That's according to Millward Brown's Going Global study. Now, in the US, only 6% of people surveyed could name a Chinese product. Awareness, however, is higher in emerging markets, with 29% of Brazilians familiar with brand China. But the aim is to change that. And here's a look at the top 5 listed Chinese companies that generate the most revenue internationally. In 5th place is PetroChina, China's largest listed oil and gas firm and one of the biggest petrochemical companies in the world. 32% of its revenue comes from international business. And recently, the company partnered with ExxonMobil in developing Iraq's West Kurna oil field. Well, buying Hisense flat-screen TVs makes sense to consumers everywhere, and the home appliance and electronics maker, Hisense, comes in 4th. It has 13 manufacturing facilities in China and several outside the country, including in South Africa and France, and exports to over 100 countries. Flying into 3rd place, China Eastern Airlines, which gets 33% of its revenue from overseas. The airline has extended its flight network from Shanghai to 1,000 cities in 187 countries. And soaring into the 2nd spot is Air China, China's national carrier with international business revenue at 34%. It operates 298 passenger routes and gained strong global brand recognition as the official carrier of the 2008 Beijing Olympics. And taking the top spot is Lenovo, which leaped to international recognition with its acquisition of IBM's personal computing division in 2005. It's now #1 in PC sales worldwide, and Lenovo is also a leader in mobile devices. Lenovo has operations in more than 60 countries and sells its products in and around 160 countries, deriving 57% of its revenue from international business. So given all this, it's actually quite astounding that 83% of consumers outside of China cannot name a single Chinese brand. And I spoke to David Roth, CEO of the Store at WPP, author and China expert, and asked him about the challenges that Chinese companies face in expanding internationally.
Well, I suppose one Chinese brand that's almost on everybody's lips, of course, is Alibaba. I would say 6 months ago, Alibaba was pretty much an unknown brand outside of China and Hong Kong, and now it's the poster child of what Chinese brands can achieve. But I also think underneath Alibaba, there are a whole host of other Chinese brands. Yunnan Baiyao is probably a really good example, which has the capacity to fuse ancient sort of Chinese traditions and medicines with modern ways of doing things. And I think those types of brands actually could have a very interesting role in the world stage.
Brands that are authentically Chinese, you think would stand to have more global recognition?
I think that they have the opportunity to position themselves as Chinese-centric brands outside of China. Of course, there are going to be many opportunities for Chinese companies to take their products outside of China, but whether or not they position them as a Chinese product, I think is up for debate.
Chinese have notoriously coveted foreign brands. Your study also includes the top Chinese brands in the domestic market. Which are the top 3?
Well, of course, the biggest Chinese brand in 2014 was China Mobile by a long way, then ICBC, the bank, and then we have Tencent. And I think all those 3 are very interesting in their own rights, because I think they demonstrate the way in which the Chinese market is working and developing. Obviously, you know, China is the most interconnected country in the world. Mobile is the way that the internet is being used by most people in China. So we see the growth in that, and we see clearly the growth and the importance of state-owned enterprises in China. But now we're seeing a big upsurge in what we would call much more consumer-facing brands. So brands like Tencent are having a huge impact in the everyday life of Chinese consumers, and their brand values going up accordingly.
Is there still the issue of concern about safety, particularly when it comes to food products? There was a big scandal with baby formula. and Nestle was a top brand being sought after by the Chinese consumer. Have you seen a shift in that mentality as standards have become stricter and better?
Those brands that manage those scandals well in terms of putting new processes in, putting new procedures in, and indeed using their brand to buy other brands in order to help consumers perceive that there's an inherent amount of product quality coming from outside of China, have increased their brand value significantly.
And that brings us to an interesting point that Jack Ma made, and that is that he has realized the American dream. Now, as an author, I know that you've done extensive research as well on the concept of the American dream, which, of course, is enshrined in culture as the rags to riches story, as opposed to the Chinese dream, as opposed to the British dream. What are the three differences?
Let's take the British dream to start off with. In fact, British consumers can't really typify what their dream is. There's no real definition of what the British dream is. The American dream is phenomenally well defined. It's about anybody in a sense can be president. All you need to do is to work hard. The Chinese dream is definitely not the American dream in a sense. It has elements of it, but the Chinese dream is much more the fusing of two things: what's good for me as an individual, but also what is good for the growth and the benefit of China. And it's putting those two seams together, which is going to be the trick of the development of the new China dream.
How can marketers then use that dream with their brands?
Well, what we've established numerically, looking at the way in which brands are made up, is that those brands that have the greatest fit in China with the notion of the Chinese dream actually outperform brands where the self-fulfillment of an individual or the self-fulfillment of China are not part of that brand's DNA. Companies who want to have a good position in China, or indeed want to work with Chinese companies outside of China in their own markets, including the USA, is to understand what the Chinese dream is all about and how their brand or their product or their services can be used and developed to not only enhance individuals but also enhance the development of China in its next growth and next phase of development.